When Sira's parents auctioned her off like livestock, they didn't even look her in the eye, because to them she was already. Bids came and went, laughter followed. But then the scarred Alpha King stepped forward and paid triple the price. Everyone assumed he'd bought a mate, but that was never what he wanted. He brought her not to his bed, but to a den of wild cubs no woman had survived caring for. She believed what she'd always been told, that her worth was nothing. Until the cubs went silent at her, she saw a worthless girl. But the Alpha King saw a queen, and when the impossible happens, the family who sold her will learn exactly what they lost.
Hello, friends. Tonight, I'm bringing you a story that will warm your heart and remind you that sometimes our deepest wounds lead us to our greatest purpose. Before we begin Sarah's journey from the auction block to becoming the Luna no one saw coming, I invite you to subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your presence here means everything. Now, let's step into a world where second chances come wrapped in snow, starlight, and the howl of wolves who desperately need a mother. The coastal winds of Silvermest Harbor carried salt and shame in equal measure. Sira stood on the weathered platform, her bare feet against splintered wood, wrists bound with iron chains that clinked with every shiver. 23 years old, auburn hair matted from 3 days without washing, wearing nothing but a thin cotton shift that did little against the ocean breeze. Her mother stood in the crowd, stone-faced and silent. Her father counted coins with eager fingers, already spending money he hadn't yet received. "She's Barren, tested by 4 healers," her father announced to the assembled wolves, his voice carrying across the docks. "But she's young, strong-backed, and knows her way around a kitchen. Good for labor, at least." The brand on her collarbone throbbed, a broken crescent moon, the mark every shifter recognized instantly. The mark that said, "This woman is defective, unworthy of a mate bond, incapable of carrying the future generation." Sira had stopped crying about it 2 years ago, when her bonded mate had rejected her publicly, throwing the rejection at her feet like garbage before the entire pack. She'd stopped begging when her parents had locked her in the cellar for bringing shame to the family bloodline. Now she just stood, numb and hollow, as strange wolves circled the platform. Their eyes assessed her like livestock. Some sneered, others looked away in disgust. A few offered insultingly low amounts. The sun was setting when everything changed. A carriage rolled into the harbor square, black as midnight with silver wolf emblems on the doors. The crowd parted instinctively. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the ocean seemed to quiet its waves. He emerged like a storm given form, tall, broad-shouldered, with ink-black hair touched with premature silver at the temples. His face bore the kind of scars that told stories of survival, one cutting through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw, a third disappearing beneath his collar. He wore simple traveling clothes, but power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Alpha King Matthias of the Stormcrest territories. Every wolf within 300 miles knew his name. Widower, warrior, ruthless ruler of the northern coastal packs. He didn't ask questions, didn't examine Sira like the others had. He simply walked to her father, pulled out a heavy leather purse, and dropped it on the table with a thud that echoed across the silent square. Her father's eyes went wide. "My lord, the price I stated was triple what you asked. Take it and leave these territories. If I see you on my lands again, you won't leave them alive." He turned to Sira, his storm-gray eyes meeting hers for the first time. "Can you walk, or do I need to carry you?" Pride made her straighten her spine despite everything. "I can walk." "Then follow me." The carriage interior smelled of leather and pine, with plush velvet seats that Sarah was almost afraid to touch. She sat rigid and small, trying not to drip seawater on the expensive upholstery. Across from her, Alpha King Matthias filled the space with his presence, silent and unreadable. A female driver guided the horses, a weathered woman with silver-streaked hair and a missing finger. She glanced back once, her expression neutral, then focused on the road ahead. Sarah counted the minutes in silence. 10, 20, 30. The coastline gave way to dense forests, then rocky cliffs, then finally the snow-capped mountains in the distance. "Why did you buy me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Matthias didn't look at her immediately. When he did, his expression was difficult to read. "You've heard of me?" "Everyone has." "Then you know I'm widowed." She nodded carefully. "My mate died 4 years ago in childbirth. Complications. The healers couldn't save her or the infant." His jaw tightened. "I have 4 surviving cubs from previous births. The youngest was 2 when their mother died. They need care I cannot provide alone." "So I'm a nanny?" "No." Something flickered in his storm-gray eyes. "You're someone who understands loss, someone who won't leave when things get difficult, because you know what difficult truly means." Sarah's throat tightened. "You bought me because I'm damaged?" "You bought me because anyone who can stand on an auction block with that much dignity despite everything has the kind of strength my cubs need to see." He leaned forward slightly. "I need honesty from you. Can you care for 4 wolf cubs who will test every boundary, who miss their mother desperately, who have driven away 5 previous caretakers in the last year?" 5? They're intense. Despite everything, a laugh bubbled up, bitter and broken. "I'm Barren, sold by my own parents, rejected by my mate, and now owned by a stranger. What could 4 cubs possibly do that's worse than what I've already survived?" "Don't underestimate them," but the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "They once convinced a caretaker the fortress was haunted by their mother's ghost. She left screaming in the middle of the night." "How old are they?" "Twins who are 12, Kieran and Mira, 10-year-old Ash, and the youngest, Leela, she's 6. Sarah looked out the window at the passing landscape. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the evergreens in white. "What happened to their mother? You said childbirth complications, but—" "Her name was Alara. She was kind, gentle, everything I wasn't." His voice carried old pain. "The 5th pregnancy was too much for her body. The healers said she was too weak, but she insisted. She wanted a large family." He closed his eyes briefly. "She got her wish, just not the way anyone wanted." Stormcrest Fortress rose from the mountainside like a giant's crown, all gray stone and sharp towers, with narrow windows that glowed golden against the darkening sky. Unlike the war fortresses Sarah had heard about in stories, this one had an almost lived-in quality. Smoke curled from multiple chimneys, laundry hung frozen on lines in a courtyard, a battered training dummy stood guard near the gates. The carriage stopped before massive wooden doors. Matthias exited first, then offered his hand to help Sarah down. She hesitated. No one had offered her courtesy in so long that she'd forgotten how to accept it, but finally placed her palm in his. His hand was warm, calloused, surprisingly gentle. The doors swung open before they reached them. A stern-faced woman stood in the entrance, arms crossed, surveying Sarah with the kind of look that could strip paint. She was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and the build of someone who'd spent her life working. "Another one, my king?" Her tone dripped skepticism. "This is Brenna, head of household. Brenna, this is Sarah. She'll be staying." "They all say they'll be staying." Brenna stepped aside to let them enter, "until Mira puts a garden snake in their bed, or Kieran accidentally locks them in the cellar, or Ash convinces them the forest is full of man-eating wraiths, or little Leela." "Where are they?" Matthias interrupted, his voice carrying a warning note. "Where they always are when you bring someone new, hiding and plotting." The interior of the fortress was surprisingly warm. A massive stone fireplace dominated the great hall, its flames dancing across polished weapons mounted on the walls. Thick rugs covered the floors. Tapestries depicted wolves running beneath full moons. Your chamber is in the south wing, Matthias said to Sarah. Second door past the library. Meals are at sunrise, midday, and dusk. You're free to explore the fortress, but the north tower is off limits. Why? His expression shuddered. Because I said so. Before Sarah could respond, a voice called from the shadows of the upper gallery. Father brought home another sacrifice. A girl appeared at the top of the stairs, 12 years old with wild black curls and her father's gray eyes, but where his were stormy, hers were mischievous. Mira. She had her arms crossed, chin lifted in challenge. Beside her materialized a boy identical in age but opposite in temperament, Kieran, with neater hair and a calculating gaze that missed nothing. This one looks too skinny to last a week. From behind a pillar, a smaller boy peered out, Ash, 10 years old, clutching a book to his chest like a shield. And on the stairs, sitting in deliberate defiance, was the youngest, Leela, 6 years old, with honey-colored hair and her mother's delicate features. She stared at Sarah with huge amber eyes filled with suspicion and barely concealed grief. "Hello," Sarah said quietly. "I'm leaving soon," Mira finished. "They always do." Sarah's room was small but clean. A narrow bed with heavy blankets, a wooden chest, a window overlooking snow-covered pines, and a small desk with a cracked mirror. Someone had left a basin of water and a rough towel. After 3 days in chains, it felt like luxury. She washed her face and arms, wincing as the water stung the raw skin on her wrists. The brand on her collarbone throbbed. In the mirror, she looked like a ghost, hollow-eyed, too thin, hair tangled beyond redemption. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Before she could answer, the door opened. Mira stood there, arms full of linens. "Brenna says you need proper bedding." Her tone suggested she disagreed with this assessment. "Thank you." The girl dumped the linens on the bed without ceremony. Her gray eyes raked over Sarah with clinical assessment. "You're younger than the others father brought." "I'm 23. The last one was 40 and cried every night. Before that was a woman who claimed she'd raised 6 cubs of her own, but she couldn't handle Ash's nightmares." Mira moved to the window, her fingers drumming against the sill. "What makes you think you're different?" Sarah sat on the bed, meeting the girl's challenging gaze. "I don't think I'm different. I think I'm desperate." Mira blinked. Apparently, honesty hadn't been the expected response. "I have nowhere else to go. No family who wants me, no mate who claims me, no pack that will accept me. This is my last chance at anything resembling a life. So yes, I'm desperate, but desperate people don't quit easily." "You're Barren." It wasn't a question. Mira had clearly seen the brand. "Yes." "Mother died trying to have more cubs. She wanted a big family so badly that she risked everything." The girl's voice cracked. "If you can't have cubs anyway, why are you even here?" The question landed like a physical blow. Sarah took a breath. "Because caring for someone doesn't require giving birth to them. My grandmother wasn't my blood mother, but she raised me with more love than my actual parents ever showed." Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Ash has nightmares about Mother every night. He screams so loud the whole fortress hears. Can you handle that?" "I can try." "Kieran won't talk to anyone. He just watches and judges and finds everyone lacking. Can you handle that?" "I can try." "Leela hasn't spoken a full sentence since Mother died. The healers say it's trauma. Can you handle that?" "I can try." "And me?" Mira's voice went sharp. "I drove away 2 caretakers myself. I put spiders in their beds, salt in their tea, locked them in closets. I made their lives miserable until they left. What makes you think I won't do the same to you?" Sarah stood, moving to face the girl directly. "Because I think you're testing whether I'll abandon you like everyone else has, and I won't." Sarah woke to screaming. She bolted upright, heart pounding, completely disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness. The screams came again, high, terrified, the sound of a child trapped in something awful. She ran barefoot into the hallway, following the sound to a door 3 rooms down. Light spilled from beneath it. She burst inside without knocking. Ash thrashed in his bed, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, eyes squeezed shut. "Mama! Mama, please, don't leave!" His small hands clawed at the air, reaching for something only he could see. Kieran sat in the corner, knees pulled to his chest, watching his brother with hollow eyes. He didn't move to help. Sarah rushed to the bed, unsure what to do. Should she wake him? Hold him? Her grandmother had taught her about night terrors. Waking someone too abruptly could make it worse. She sat on the edge of the bed, placing a gentle hand on Ash's shoulder. "You're safe," she said softly. "You're home. You're safe." The boy's screams turned to whimpers. His eyes opened, wild, unseeing, still trapped between nightmare and reality. "It's Sarah. You're in your room. You're safe." Slowly, awareness crept back into his amber eyes. He focused on her face, breathing hard, tears streaming down his cheeks. "You're not Mama." "No, I'm not." "Mama's dead." "I know." He started crying in earnest then, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his small frame. Without thinking, Sarah pulled him into her arms, letting him cry against her shoulder. He clung to her desperately, his whole body trembling. From the corner, Kieran spoke. "He has them every night, sometimes twice. The healers say he'll grow out of it, but it's been 4 years." Sarah looked at the older boy over Ash's shaking shoulders. "Do you have them too?" Kieran's expression shuddered. "No." "You're lying." His jaw clenched. "You've been here 6 hours. You don't know anything about us." "I know what loss looks like. I know what it means to pretend you're fine when you're breaking inside." She stroked Ash's hair gently. "You don't have to perform strength for me. Your father says, alphas don't. Your father carries his grief like armor. You don't have to do the same." Kieran stood abruptly. "You don't understand. You're not—" The door opened. Matthias filled the frame, still dressed despite the late hour. His eyes took in the scene. Ash crying in Sarah's arms, Kieran defensive and raw, the disheveled bed. "I heard the screaming," he said quietly. "He's settling now," Sarah replied, still holding Ash. Matthias moved into the room, his presence immediately calming. He sat on the other side of the bed, placing a large hand on Ash's back. "Bad one?" Ash nodded against Sarah's shoulder, unable to speak. "It's okay to miss her," Matthias said, his voice gentle in a way Sarah hadn't heard before. "It's okay to be sad." "I want Mama back," Ash whispered. "I know, cub, I know." They sat like that for over an hour, Matthias, Sarah, and Ash, with Kieran watching from the corner, until finally the boy's breathing evened and he slipped into genuine sleep. Morning came cold and bright. Sarah woke to find fresh clothes laid out, simple wool dress, thick stockings, sturdy boots. Brenna's doing, probably. Breakfast was a tense affair. The cubs sat in their assigned seats, picking at food Brenna had prepared. Matthias was absent, already gone to handle pack business, according to Brenna. Sarah tried to make conversation. "What do you all usually do during the day?" Silence. "Do you have lessons? Training?" More silence. Mira finally spoke. "We do whatever we want. Father's too busy to care." "I doubt that's true." "You don't know anything." The girl stabbed at her eggs viciously. After the meal, Sarah decided to explore. She wandered the fortress grounds, discovering a training yard, stables, a smithy, and finally, behind the eastern wing, an overgrown garden. It had been beautiful once. Stone pathways wound between raised beds, now choked with dead weeds. A fountain stood dry and cracked in the center. Trellises sagged under the weight of dead vines. But in one corner, protected by a partial stone wall, Sarah found something alive, frost-resistant herbs, struggling but surviving. Rosemary, thyme, winter sage. That was Mother's garden. Sarah turned. Leela stood at the gate, her small hands gripping the iron bars. The 6-year-old rarely spoke, but apparently the garden merited words. "It's lovely," Sarah said gently. It's dead. Leela's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. Everything she touched is dead now. Not everything. Sarah knelt by the herbs. See these? They're still fighting to grow. They just need help. Leela stepped closer, curious despite herself. Can you fix it? I can try. Would you like to help? The little girl considered this seriously, then nodded once. They worked in companionable silence, Sarah clearing dead growth, Leela collecting stones to repair a broken border. After an hour, Mira appeared, claiming she was just passing by, but within minutes she was helping dig out stubborn roots. Then Kieran showed up with a bucket he'd found in the cellar. Even Ash wandered over, though he mostly just sat on the fountain's edge, watching. Mother used to sing while she worked, Leela said suddenly. Her small voice carried across the garden. What did she sing? Asked Sarah. Leela hummed a melody, sweet and haunting, wordless but full of emotion. That's beautiful. Father can't hear it anymore, Mira said, not looking up from her weeding. We tried singing it once after she died, and he left the room so fast he knocked over a chair. Sarah's heart ached. Grief is strange. Sometimes the beautiful things hurt most because they remind us of what we lost. Do you have someone you lost? Ash asked quietly. My grandmother. She raised me when my parents couldn't be bothered. When she died, I couldn't look at her garden for 2 years without crying. Did the crying stop? Leela's amber eyes were huge. Eventually, and then I could remember the good parts without only feeling sad. I want to remember Mama without crying, the little girl whispered. Sarah reached over and squeezed her small hand. You will, I promise. The attack came 3 weeks later, during the new moon when shifter powers weakened. Sarah was in the kitchen with Brenna, learning to make the special meat pies the cubs actually enjoyed eating, when the warning howls began. Sharp, urgent, deadly serious. Brenna's face drained of color. Raiders, get the cubs to the safe room, now. Sarah ran. She found Mira and Kieran in the library, Ash in his room, but Leela was in the garden, humming to the herbs they'd been nursing back to health. Leela, Sarah scooped up the little girl. We need to go, now. But the plants, we'll be fine. You won't be if we don't move. She ran with Leela in her arms, meeting the others in the great hall. Brenna was already there, opening a hidden door beneath a massive tapestry. Inside, all of you, don't come out until your father or I come for you. The safe room was small, dark, lined with supplies. The cubs filed in with practiced efficiency. They'd done this before. What about you? Mira asked Brenna. I'm too old to hide. I'll be helping defend. The old woman's eyes were fierce. Sarah, you stay with them. The door closed, leaving them in near darkness. Leela clung to Sarah. Ash pressed against her other side. Kieran and Mira sat rigid, trying to be brave. Above them, they heard shouting, snarling, the clash of wolves fighting, furniture breaking. Something exploded. The whole fortress shook. Father will stop them, Kieran said, but his voice wavered. Of course he will, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. Minutes felt like hours. Leela started crying softly. Ash was shaking. Even stoic Mira looked terrified. Then they heard it, footsteps directly above their hiding spot. Heavy, deliberate, searching. Check everywhere, a rough voice commanded. The Alpha King's cubs are worth more than gold. Sarah's blood went cold. This wasn't just a raid, this was a kidnapping attempt. The footsteps came closer, stopped right above them. What's under this tapestry? Sarah made a split-second decision. She pushed the cubs to the back of the safe room, behind stored supplies. Stay here, don't make a sound, no matter what happens. What are you? Mira started. Protecting you. Sarah positioned herself at the door, holding a heavy iron candlestick she'd grabbed from a shelf. Her heart hammered, her hands shook, but she'd been sold, branded, rejected, and discarded. She had nothing left to lose except these 4 cubs who'd somehow become hers to protect. The tapestry moved, the hidden door's mechanism clicked. Light flooded in. A wolf in half-shifted form filled the opening, more beast than man, with yellow eyes and elongated fangs. He saw Sarah and smiled. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Sarah swung the candlestick with everything she had. It connected with his skull with a sickening crack. He roared, stumbling back, and Sarah slammed the door shut, throwing the internal bolt. Outside, the wolf howled in rage. The siege lasted 4 hours. Sarah held the cubs in the darkness while battle raged above. They heard their father's roar, primal and terrifying, the sound of an alpha king defending his territory. They heard screams, breaking, fire. Finally, silence. Then, "Cubs, it's safe, come out." Matthias's voice, rough but alive. Sarah opened the door to chaos. The great hall was destroyed, furniture smashed, tapestries torn, blood staining the stone floor. Matthias stood in the center, covered in wounds but upright. Brenna was bandaging a deep cut on her arm. Other pack warriors were dragging unconscious raiders out. "Papa!" Leela ran to him, and he caught her with his good arm, holding her tight. The other cubs followed, checking him for injuries with worried hands. I'm fine. He set Leela down gently. Then his eyes found Sarah. "You kept them safe?" "I tried." Brenna snorted. She did more than try. Found one of the raiders unconscious outside the safe room with a head wound. Girl's got fight in her. Matthias's expression shifted to something Sarah couldn't quite read. "You fought?" "I had a candlestick and terrible aim. He had a thick skull. It worked out." "You could have been pilled." "So could they." She gestured to the cubs. "I wasn't going to let anyone take them." Something changed in his eyes then. Recognition, respect, maybe more. That night, after the cubs were asleep and the fortress secured, Matthias found Sarah in the garden. She was checking on the plants with lantern light, needing the normalcy of growing things after so much violence. "Thank you," he said, simply. "I already thanked you." "Not properly." He moved closer. "You're not their blood. You owe them nothing, yet you stood between them and danger anyway." "They're children. Of course I did." 5 previous caretakers ran at the first sign of trouble. You charged at an enemy wolf with a candlestick. He shook his head, almost smiling. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." They stood in comfortable silence, watching snow begin to fall on the recovering garden. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah finally said. "Of course." "The brand on my collarbone, the one that says I'm Barren, is there any way it could be wrong?" Matthias's expression grew serious. "Why do you ask?" "Because 4 healers examined me, but they all served my former mate's family. And I've been thinking, what if they lied? What if he paid them to brand me so he could reject me without shame? That would be illegal, a serious crime. So is selling your daughter at auction, but my parents did it anyway." She touched the brand unconsciously. "I need to know the truth, if there's even a chance." Matthias was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'll send for my personal healer. If anyone can determine the truth, it's her. But Sarah, even if the brand is real, it doesn't change your worth. It changes everything." "Not to them." He nodded toward the fortress where 4 cubs slept. "Not to me." The healer arrived 3 days later, a sharp-eyed woman named Iris who'd served the Stormcrest pack for 40 years. She examined Sarah's brand in private, running her fingers over the scar tissue with professional detachment. What?" Sarah's heart pounded. "This is shoddy work. The moon symbol is incorrectly rendered. The curve is backward. The inner points are uneven. Any trained healer would recognize this as forgery immediately." The world tilted. Forgery? Someone wanted you branded Barren but didn't have the skill to do it properly. Iris's eyes were kind. "I'll need to run tests to confirm, but based on what I'm seeing, you're not Barren. You never were." Sarah couldn't breathe. Years of shame, of worthlessness, of believing herself fundamentally broken, all based on a lie. "Who would do this?" she whispered. "Someone who benefited from your disgrace. I'd look at anyone who gained from your rejection." Her former mate, his family, the political alliance they'd formed immediately after discarding her. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Iris completed her examination. You're healthy, whole, and perfectly capable of bearing cubs. I'll put this in writing for the Alpha King." When Matthias read the report, his expression went cold with fury. "I'll have investigators sent to your former pack immediately. If they forged a healer's brand, they'll answer for it under pack law." "I don't want revenge," Sarah said quietly. "I just want to move forward." "The law isn't revenge, it's justice." His storm gray eyes softened. "You were robbed of years of your life based on lies. That deserves consequences." Over the following weeks, the investigation uncovered everything. Her former mate had paid 3 healers to brand her falsely so he could pursue a political match with a rival pack's daughter. Her parents had known and accepted bribes to keep silent. The entire conspiracy laid bare. But Sarah found she didn't care about their punishment. She was too busy living. The cubs had stopped testing her, started trusting her. Ash's nightmares decreased with her there to comfort him. Kieran began talking about his feelings instead of bottling them. Mira stopped her cruel pranks. Leela started speaking in full sentences again, her voice growing stronger each day. The garden bloomed under their combined care. New herbs, vegetables, even a few early flowers pushing through the last snow. One evening, Matthias found Sarah there as usual. The cubs were inside with Brenna, finishing their lessons. "They love you," he said without preamble, "as much as they loved their mother. Maybe differently, but just as deeply." Sarah's throat tightened. "I love them too." "I know." He moved closer. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty." "All right." "Could you see yourself staying here, not as hired help, but as family, as my mate?" She looked up at him, this scarred Alpha King who'd bought her freedom and given her purpose. "Are you asking because you need a mother for your cubs?" "I'm asking because I need you."